welcome to episode 4 of Manufacturing Intelligence. In this episode, Chris Cole, Associate Editorial Director at FarmTech, and co-host Rick Janish, Senior Director of Education, Outreach, and Digital Experience at Open Biopharma, finished a 3-episode series on digital twins with a fascinating discussion about Cleanroom digital twins with John Thompson, Global Director of the Digital Center of Excellence at CAI. Specifically, Thompson addresses the questions: how do you describe a digital twin and what it changes about a traditional IQ, OQ, PQ cycle? When a cleanroom digital twin is deployed, what are the core inputs the system needs and how does it translate those into a living simulation? What are the most common pain points pharma manufacturers run into when validating a cleanroom? How does a simulated validation hold up under GMP scrutiny, and what does digital twin generated data look like to an auditor? What gap in the market led to the creation of cleanroom digital twins? For a pharma manufacturing leader trying to make a business case internally, what do the performance data look like? And as facilities move toward more modular and continuous pharma manufacturing models, where do digital twins fit into the ongoing life cycle of a facility? First, if you could start off, just give an introduction to yourself.
Yeah, so John Thompson, I'm the Global Director of the Digital Center of Excellence at CAI. We're a consulting organization focused primarily on life sciences companies and help them achieve their operational readiness and operational excellence goals. I've been in the industry for 27 years, for about the last 23 years of that, I've been implementing automation and digital technologies in one way or another. Started out, at that time implementing things like LIMS and MES and quality management systems. Got into process automation, and then I've kind of, just progressed and tried to keep up with technology as it goes. And working with a products group right now at CAI that works a lot with digital twins, capturing current spaces using technology scanning. We do some AI planning, some digital transformation, digital maturity consulting.
So yeah, it's kind of, Rick and I have done a few of these on digital twins, and we always want to start kind of with the basics. So, clean room qualification and commissioning have always kind of been a resource intensive process, right? So
Yeah.
as someone who's been through to the traditional IQ, OQ, PQ cycle, how would you describe what a digital twin actually is and what it changes about that experience?
So first off, I don't think, the actual physical qualification is going to be replaced by a digital twin in any way, shape, or form, but I think it's going to be transformed and, changed by the capabilities of using a digital twin. So, the traditional process is kind of like a design team designs it, and then the construction team comes in, builds out the physical space. You come in and commission it. You may have a separate validation team that qualifies it. Deviations, though, and problems and design flaws are usually found after that construction phase. Like, so you've already built the clean room out. You've got equipment in there. You may even have, some early phase processes running in there before you really start identifying the issues that you might have in the design. Now, everybody signed off on the design. You probably had a design review, and theoretically, it all looked great on paper. But then, you get into practice, and maybe we didn't account for all the variability of that. What's going to be in the physical space. The digital twin is actually going to, if we feed it the right data and enough of the design and the process data, along with some physics engines, some dynamic flow calculations. Like, there's a lot of simulation on the background that it has to have, but you should be able to do a much more thorough upfront design, so that you're reducing the number of problems that you find, the number of issues that you find, or unexpected changes that you're going to find down the road once the clean room's built out. And then that's going to save time, but it can also save a significant amount of money. If a problem or a change caught in the design phase is going to cost you 10% of what it's going to cost you to change a facility after it's already built and there's equipment already sitting in there.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And that kind of feeds pretty well into the next question, which is when a clean room digital twin is deployed, what are the core inputs that that system needs? Facility design data, HVAC specs, personnel flow, and other things. And then also, how are those translated into a living simulation?
Yeah, so I mean, you hit it on the head, right? You're going to need, your 3D model, your BIM model. You're going to need to have an accurate representation of all the equipment that's in there. You'll need to have the specs on the HVAC equipment, the airflow. Um, you'll need to know what a personnel plan is, what the expected personnel movements are going to be. But there's also some back-end physics engines. There's some first principles. Simulation with temperatures and flow rates, et cetera, that you're going to have to understand, along with, like I said, some fluid dynamics pieces to know how airflow is going to happen, what the impact is of, obstacles or uh, variabilities within the system. So that's what you feed it to get the initial simulation. You're going to want to tie that to process reality, right? So the simulation is good, but you can't rely on that as your 100% source of truth. So at some point in time, you're going to have to verify that versus what is actually happening in the field. And we can measure a lot of that through environmental monitoring data, through airflows, pressure differentials, particle counts, other things that we monitor now to check and to kind of keep those clean rooms in control. But when you convert it from the design phase to the living operations phase, that's the kind of data that you're going to want to check against, is to, make sure that what the simulation or what the twin was telling you is what you're seeing in reality. And then that's going to allow you to do more, experimentation in the twin down the line, because you have a level of faith that, anything that you're changing in that twin is actually representative of what's in the field and happening in real time.
So that real-time data element is obviously key to making a digital twin a digital twin.
Right.
Um, I know we at Open Biopharma we actually worked with you guys to have we're still at the early phase of that model. So we have the model and we're moving towards the construction phase, and so we're kind of, as you described that earlier, I was like, okay, cool, yeah, that's where we're moving. I like this. But I have a curiosity, and so the technology that we access the digital twin in right now, when I think about its connectivity, right? So you talk about environmental monitoring, you talk about all these other data points. Where do these data points meet or live, or is there some sort of arrangement that is, that works well with this? Because I always hear about how digital twins can enable these things, but I'm always curious how that happens, how all of those data points connect. Is there like a piece of software that you guys are using that collects all of that? Is one kind of house where that is, or is it multiple houses that together paint a picture?
There's several different approaches that you
Mhm.
can take to that. Different 3D modeling technologies have different ways of accessing it. I'm actually finding now that some of the more prevalent BIM solutions, Autodesk as an example, is starting to create more bolt-ons that work with their 3D models within, so that you can have those data connections and you can have actually a real-time feed into the points of interest. I think when we scanned you guys a couple of years ago, we built out maybe some points of interest in there. So we had to manually go in and say, here's a,
Yep.
fume hood, or here's a refrigerator, and kind of tie data into that. But if you use some of the more out of the box 3D tools, a lot of those already have built-in connections of, as you put in a piece of process equipment, it's already got connections into all of the downstream commissioning documentation, maybe even like the user manuals and that piece of it. So that's already an entity within the model that then I can now add in, data points from my environmental monitoring system, or, even my MES or my maintenance management system, all into that one point, so that in the model I can access all of that. I mean, I'd love for in the future to get to a point where we're using the 3D model as the user
Oh yeah.
interface for most of the people who are out in the field, for your operators, for your maintenance techs, your calibration people, so that they can basically access anything that they want to do in the virtual world while they're in the physical world, but it gives them access to, pretty much anything, any information they would need.
What are the most common pain points you see pharma manufacturers running into today when they try to validate a clean room the conventional way, particularly around contamination control and pressure cascade verification?
I don't think it's one necessarily that can be pointed at as the one that's kind of driving use of this technology. It's more just a conglomeration of all the different things that could go wrong and an increase in variability, I think, in these clean room facilities that's actually driving us where we're going with digital twin. I mean, when we were many years ago in clean rooms, it was a single product facility, typically very static equipment. You had one process running through there, so your personnel flow was fairly consistent. So the variability was just significantly less when we used to approach clean room validation as a kind of one-time process. You do it, and execute it based on these certain conditions and these certain parameters. But when you start introducing a lot more variability, like we have with, modular biotech equipment, with, RABs, with, flow hoods, with, isolators. There's a lot more equipment in there. There's a lot more multi-process, happening in the single clean room, right? Like we're doing multi-product facilities. We change, CDMOs change out the equipment all the time. So it's much more difficult to validate that clean room, the airflow quality, the pressure changes, the particle flows, all of that piece of it on a single static set of parameters, or physical makeup of the facility.
Yeah, I think the genesis, I guess, of that question is like, yeah, what solution is a clean room digital twin solving for, I guess?
So what's it solving for? It's, helping us identify a contamination control strategy. So I think the regulatory expectations with like Annex 1 and moving more towards a quality risk management approach, and looking at a contamination control strategy rather than just like validating single pieces of process equipment is is helping change the conversation from was our clean room within control at the certain set of parameters to how is it going to operate across this entire range of operating parameters that it's going to have in the field. And so it's giving us more of a foundation for a scientific understanding of what's happening in that clean room rather than just telling us that it was in control at that certain point in time.
I know one of the big draws for us in terms of seeing the digital twin in play was because, we have such a plan. Our Since we do pilot batch pre-production, and since that's our
Mhm.
intention, for us, our turnaround time is, has to be very, very short because we're talking about 12-week runs at maximum. And so these are incredibly tiny runs. Some of them are 4 weeks. So, preparing for that, having that digital twin ahead of time and having the materials kind of prepared and having that basically almost like a virtual staging ground to us was very appealing. And then on top of that, being able to account for these exceptionally unique production runs every single time, being able to try to account for those as best we can, collect that data, attribute that data. We saw this. I was like, this is going to be fantastic. And then since we also have a whole bunch of other smart facility aspects, the idea of plugging it into the other components, I was like, oh, this is going to be so cool. It's going to take years for us to get to that fruition, but I'm so excited about this particular piece. But how does this work with, regulatory agencies? What do they see there?
Yeah, John, you'd actually brought it up, the regulatory side of things. So agencies like the FDA and the EMA are increasingly attentive to data integrity and process understanding. So how does a simulated validation hold up under GMP scrutiny? And what does a documentation generated by digital twin actually look like to an auditor?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's fundamentally that different from, other computer system validation or digital validation. I think the big thing to an auditor is just how you use it. And if you're using this digital twin as your single source of truth without, like I said earlier, verifying that data in real time with what's actually happening out in the field, and keeping continuous process understanding going, they're going to start to question it. You know, if you're not keeping your model up to date and not accounting for equipment changes or personnel flows or product changes that are within that facility, they're going to start to question it. But I think as long as you're taking a true, scientific based approach, continuous verification approach to the way that you're using the digital twin and using it as a source of data and as a way to do kind of pre planned experimentation for changes, helping you plan, understand, design, build strategies better. I think the agencies are pretty accepting of these digital tools now.
Yeah, I think what you just said kind of speaks to the whole point of that warning letter that
The Prilio one?
yes, yeah,
Yes, yes. That one
The
was
infamous, the LLM didn't tell us to do process validation.
right.
oh.
Yeah. It's the human in the loop concept with AI is similar
Mhm.
to what we're talking about with digital twins, right? Like
Hmm.
it does not replace human intelligence. We still need to, have somebody who understands, the data that's being output and, the overall process, take a look at what it is and make sure it's scientifically sound. But at the end of the day, these are tools to help those people do their job faster and smarter, not to replace the human element.
Yep.
Yeah. And could this conceivably, could this tool, because we've talked about it in terms of the prep, right? In terms of getting to that point, but then that's obviously huge component for us at Open Biopharma. But also, what about like a Gemba walk?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, certainly. I mean, these things can help with ongoing operational excellence or, improvement efforts as well, right? Like you can capture data, you mentioned Gimbal Walk. That's definitely a use case that we've seen for the digital twin is where instead of, somebody taking a piece of paper and going out into the field with a notebook and trying to write down everything that they see that's wrong in the facility and, trying to note in on paper where something is, you can actually capture things within the digital twin and really know, where you see problems, where you see quality issues or things that need to be fixed. And, it's just a more spatially relevant way to, interact with your facility.
Makes sense. I think the next question I had was actually we already kind of addressed it. The gap in the market that led to the creation of the digital twins. Is there anything you'd want to add to that? Any particular project or failure mode that made it clear that the industry needed something like this?
Yeah, I don't think it was any single failure mode. I think it was just a desire to do things better and more efficiently. And, I talked about it's about saving time and effort in that design and construction process. Like the earlier that you can catch these things in the design process, if there's going to be, airflow issues or dead dead legs or something that's causing an issue within the facility, catching that at design is costing you pennies on the dollar compared to if you actually build out the facility, you have to go back in and rebuild or change the design of the facility once it's constructed.
And this whole design also makes me think about, because I know as a person with disabilities, I often think about the accessibility components about these things. And I think, digital twins present an opportunity.
Mhm.
And can you think of any particular thing? Because obviously, like I have a few in mind, but I'm just curious your thoughts about where a digital twin might also improve that type of, opportunity. Because obviously, folks from home can see the building in real time conceptually, right? And that opens up a whole new opportunity for how, managers, supervisors, everybody works together. So what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, there's a couple of things that you just talked about. One, that, just an accessibility perspective, there's a lot of the simulation tools now and even the 3D models that offer the capability to test wheelchair accessibility or vehicle accessibility to certain areas. It knows how wide corridors are, what the height of something would be. So if you're talking about physical access, there's definitely ways to take a look at that and make sure that the design you're doing is meeting the needs that you have for that. But certainly the remote collaboration aspect is huge as well. We've worked with a couple of customers who wanted a reality capture model of their facility to, we call it the remote executive. In one case, there was several plants that were being built. There were, the capital projects VP in charge of all of them was on the East Coast, and they were on the West Coast and in the Midwest, and he couldn't physically fly there all the time, but wanted to be able to go walk it and understand, as they were talking about different things, kind of see in the facility where that was and what what things were around it and understand that. But just to be able to collaborate in a remote environment like that is also a use case that we're seeing as well.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's a great point you brought up, Rick. Um, for a pharma manufacturing leader trying to make a business case internally, what did the performance data look like for these digital twins? And can you share specific figures like time saving, commissioning, reductions in deviation, energy savings from any actual deployments?
A lot of the time that you're going to save is around commissioning qualification. That's probably the most easily measurable time figure that you can save from that. But by reducing the amount of time it takes to actually commission something because you designed it better in the first place, like that one, we've seen 10 to 30% reduction in time and resource hours in there. Rework, which is a harder one to measure because it's a preventative type measurement. So, you're not actually having to do rework. So it's harder to measure on the back end, but it's about 20 to 50% reduction in the amount of rework that you're going to have to do based on the things that you found in commissioning that were wrong with the facility. Pressure excursions, it could save you 30 to 70% during those because you can actually go back and, I don't think we talked about this before, like in actual production, if you have an excursion or something that, goes out of specification in the past, we've had to kind of try to create that from a bunch of data on paper, and a person would have to, sit and look through everything and try to discern what went wrong in that, where if you can recreate all of those conditions in the digital twin, you might actually be able to find out exactly what happened and very quickly point to the root cause of that excursion. So, being able to simulate and recreate kind of some of those excursions in the digital twin and in real time can save pretty significant, like 30 to 70%, I think we've seen in those reductions in time, and related to that, investigation times in general. So 25 to 50% just getting to a root cause faster, understanding what it is and being able to fix the problem so that, you're preventing that downstream as well. Change control assessments is another one that is, in production real time assessment. So instead of having to do a theoretical understanding of what the change is going to be, shut down your clean room, make the changes, and then, experiment and iterate until you get there, you've got a chance to perfect that offline. So it's kind of the same value prop as the design phase, but it's, it's probably even more impactful because most likely in a change control situation, your clean room is in use making product. And every day you take that down as a day of production that you've missed. So, being able to do that iteration and experimentation offline ahead of time is actually going to significantly reduce that amount of downtime you have based on change management. And then there's, energy consumption as well. You can optimize your HVAC systems, your airflow systems. So, 5 to 25% reduction at times in, the amount of energy you're consuming, just trying to keep your airflows in validated parameters.
Yeah, that's huge. I would think that's pretty enticing to anybody who's looking to create or, add on a clean room facility. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I was gonna say the energy savings alone right now would be worth it, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Energy's not cheap right now for sure.
Nope.
So as facilities move toward more modular and continuous farm and manufacturing models, where do you see digital twins fitting into the ongoing life cycle of a facility? Not just at startup, but as tools, as a tool that evolves with operations.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it a little bit. I mean, these are modular facilities that are intended to change over time and, different products, maybe do things in a different way, optimize process flows. So you're going to have a continuous stream of very agile change management that's happening, over the course of the life of that facility. And, I think that's the biggest place that you can utilize digital twins and simulation to impact is to just reduce the amount of downtime and impact to your capacity and ability to produce product in those facilities by doing more of that offline. And that's where you're tying into your real-time process systems is going to impact it as well, because the more data that you feed that model, the more accurate it's going to be. So if you're bringing in information from your maintenance management system, your environmental system, even your deviations and excursions, maybe even your batch data from like a electronic batch record or MES, and bringing in all those critical quality attributes of your facility to that model, it just deepens the understanding of what this particular change would impact to the facility. Um, Now one thing that we'll be cautious of is if those facilities are changing rapidly, you also have to keep the model up to date. So, tying your 3D twin to the actual physical space and making sure that those are always equivalent is going to be a bit of a challenge and probably something that people aren't used to. I mean, historically, this industry has taken a BIM model through the capital project, and a lot of times, our company does a lot of commissioning qualification work. The BIM's out of date before we even get done with commissioning because they're, in real time doing punch lists and finishing out the facility and making changes. And nobody's going back at that point in time because the building's constructed and actually updating the 3D model. But we've got to change the mindset to, that model has to be something that we maintain, do change management on, keep it completely equivalent to the actual physical facility if we're going to get these kind of, efficiencies that we're gaining by using it.
As we have these tools, right? As we have as organizations who have digital twins, because obviously at Open Platform we have an intention to use this full through. I'm curious what your thoughts are around, the consistent evolution of all of the, intelligence tools at our disposal, the ever-growing list of things, especially these newer tools. I'm not going to name any names, but moreover, like the technologies around computer vision and more generative AI-based systems. How do you see those potentially being leveraged by someone who has a digital twin? Do you see that as a benefit, or how so do you think that those could be leveraged in a way? Because you mentioned maintaining the digital twin. Would computer vision be a component of that? Where do you see these technologies? Obviously, this is more in the hypothetical space down the road, but having a tool like this is not just the tool now, but what is the tool useful later as well?
Yeah, I mean, and it's, you're aware of this. It's fairly manual right now to keep that model up to date. So you're either having to, say, come in with a LiDAR scanning capability that can do a reality capture of what's currently in the field, and then using that with, to overlay to the existing BIM model, figure out what changes are, or you're having to actually have somebody go back into the BIM model and, create that piece manually. So it's either a CAD person or paying to scan. But I could foresee in the future, like you're suggesting, that AI could become a capability to do that. We could feed in a architectural drawing of the new piece of equipment that you're going to add, and you just have it place it where you specify within the model, and then it, builds the model around it and, adds it to your process flow. So, I think a lot of those things are going to get more automated in the future.
Oh yeah.
I don't know which tools it will be. Certainly, AI is coming up with new capabilities all the time, but definitely there's a possibility to automate that change management aspect of it.
Yeah, I've seen these really cool tools where folks will take more low budget LiDAR tools
Uh-huh.
where they'll just kind of scan in objects and turn them into 3D things using AI, using generative AI now. Super cool. It's a combination of computer vision and generative AI, but those are usually, predetermined objects, and so most people are unaware. So they'll see it and be like, "Oh my gosh, you could do everything." I'm like, "Well, actually, that can only do determined objects." But I do agree. I think there'll be in a future point, especially since a lot of the CAD design, a lot of these designs are in the hands of the equipment manufacturer or different manufacturers. So if those types of things are more shareable, I think in the future where we're a little bit more open with data, in that sense, I can't wait to see how a digital twin like this just can get leveraged in so many different ways. But I see it right now. I see the future. I see the potential where I've seen it. I think it's really cool. And I think this is such a great instance of how a digital twin, because we talk about the digital twin being that, that it's kind of a real-time twin, right? That it's looking at that real-time data. And I think that this is such a really practical application for a digital twin. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd love to see us get to a point where equipment manufacturers are including their, CAD model as part of the turnover package that they give to, a customer when they buy that piece of equipment.
That would be so awesome. Maybe that's a hint for equipment
Yeah, there you
manufacturers out there. Come on, just give us your sweet, sweet data. It's fine.
work with us here. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, John. Both of us really do appreciate it.